Now my soul is a witness. Yes, my soul is a witness. Now my soul is a witness. Yes, my soul is a witness. Now you read in the Bible and you'll understand. Methuselah was the oldest man. He lived 969, died and went to heaven, Lord, in due time. Now Methuselah was a witness. Yes, Methuselah was a witness. Oh, Methuselah was a witness. Yes, Methuselah was a witness. Now you read on down and you'll understand. Samson was the strongest man. Samson, he went out at one time, slew 10,000 of the Philistines. Delilah fooled Samson, this we know. The Holy Bible tells us so. Shaved off his head just as clean as your hand. Strength became just like any other man. Now that's another witness. Yes, that's another witness. Oh, that's another witness. Yes, that's another witness. Now Daniel was a Hebrew child and went to pray to his God for a while. King at once for Daniel did send, cast him into the lion's den. The Lord sent an angel the lions for to keep, and Daniel lay down and went to sleep. Daniel was a witness. Yes, Daniel was a witness. Oh, Daniel was a witness. Yes, Daniel was a witness. Now who will be a witness? Yes, who will be a witness? Now who will be a witness for my Lord? Who will be a witness for my
Lord? There, I think one of the most interesting things is seeing Reverend Jackson, and you look at so many people and then you see how things end up being, especially him running for president in 1984 and some of the things that he said in 1972, and then some people will probably say they don't recognize that guy today. I think the question becomes, how do we get to that point? You know what I mean? What happens in people's lives and stuff that leads them to end up, you know, where they are. So I think that the good out of the convention is us coming together, you know, the various different factions of black people coming together, and I think that that's still needed today. I think that there are some, after that convention, a lot of things happen with black political power. I think people look at what happened with Michigan and Michigan walking out, you notice that. And then, you know, was really something that's, a lot of the people that were in that documentary, I actually had a chance to get to know and to work with on many different levels. And a lot of them have passed on. And that's hard for me to see when you see Betty Shabazz is no longer here, Queen Mother Moore is no longer here, Baraka is no longer here. They're here, their works are here, so they continue to live through us coming here today. But when you see certain people that you had an opportunity to work with and talk with and know that they're no longer here, that touches you in a special way. It makes you question, are you doing enough? Where are we as a people? How do we get here? Are we satisfied with where we are? What do we need to do to move on from where we are? So when you see Reverend Jackson or Charles Diggs, you know, Conyers, he's no longer in office, and you see what happened to him, you look at that, and you have to take a look at the fact that we did come together, and we came together around a positive agenda. And some of the things that they wanted to do was cut the military budgets. They wanted to deal with crime and so forth. So it's a lot of stuff that took place in 1972 that's still relevant today. I like to take the time to acknowledge someone we have here. State Senator Bert Johnson is over there, you know, and the spirit moved him to come to this event. I was his chief of staff, and that was one of the many things that I did, and some of the magic that was made in Lansing. I don't think you're going to get that anymore. You know, that you won't get that anymore. So some of us have lived the black political experience. We're all affected by it. And when you see that convention, though Michigan walked out of that came Coleman Young becoming mayor, and you saw a lot of progress for African Americans that came out of that convention. Another person that was involved in that convention was Dr. Carl Gregory. He was on one of the work groups. You had First Independence Bank. So even though they may not, I think a lot of people look at that convention and they say, well, a third party, which I don't like to use the term third, because if you call that a third party, then you've already been defeated, because you're saying the other two parties are more important than yours. So I like the independent black political party, independent political party. Even though that did not take place out of that, there were a lot of gains that were made, and a lot of people who attended that convention went on to do some great things, like Queen Mother Moore's fight for reparations, Ron Daniels Institute of Black World, Willie Brown went on to become mayor of San Francisco, Coleman Young went on to become mayor of Detroit, Maynard Jackson went on to become mayor of Atlanta. Then you had some black Congress people. But interestingly enough, one of the things that could have touched on a little bit more was Shirley Chisholm was running for president at that time. You see, and off of her work and so forth, foundations were made for Reverend Jackson to run in '84. Ultimately, Obama won in 2008. And of course, that's been a love-hate relationship with us as a people. Some of us viewed that as symbolism for our kids, and we did not anticipate a lot of change coming out of that. And some of us who have been involved in the political process know that where we're at today in America is kind of what the original design was for. So when you see people talking about, wow, we can't believe that Trump is saying these things or acting this way, some of us that are very familiar with the process say, oh, finally America is showing up. You know, they're showing up to play. And that's this constant struggle that we're gonna have to fight to bring real values, spiritual values to this city, and this country. And I think that if you're gonna do any type of organizing, it has to be grassroots, ground level. And I think that what you see that's different between today and then is black political consciousness. There was a little bit more going on at that time than we have today. And I think that one of the ways we deal with it is we deal with black political consciousness, the rise of black political consciousness, development of it, in order to address the challenges that we have today. I think without that, then we're not really going to be able to move forward and deal with the challenges that we're facing today. Any questions or any comments on what you all thought about the film?
I felt like I'm disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
My sister, my oldest sister was born in '72. I was born in '75.
Okay.
So the theme was very inspirational and appropriate but it just wasn't, obviously it wasn't a follow through. Like, I feel like what I saw in that room was enough power, collective education, and experience to actually just move away from this mainstream American corporate political process. As long as we play that game, we're gonna be tied up by their strings.
You saw that
It's
political
theirs.
power in that room.
I saw Mama
That
Nandi.
political power didn't keep going.
Exactly.
They
And that's what
freaking stopped.
that's what I'm saying.
And that's the problem. There was enough right there
Right in that
to
room.
run on and build the whole damn nation.
That was it.
And they stopped.
Like they
Somehow they stopped. Somewhere.
They had the greatest leaders from each
Yes.
collective state
Each state.
in the room.
Yeah.
And they were there for a week, delegating and talking and whatever. Excuse me. It should have been an immediate follow-up
Immediate.
and course of action taken to move, like he said, the wards, the districts, the communities, the blocks away from the mainstream political process and into our own process. Autonomy, self-sufficiency is what we need. Like, that's what they hold over us. Their power is that the politicians run the power companies, basically, because the money own the politics now. So you got the politicians owning the power grid, and that's really the largest power they hold over us, is that we've been domesticated into dependency. We don't know how to live without them and their
Especially
things.
up here.
Right, exactly. And so, if nothing else, they should at least come with a school. You know, a school for each state. Each state have a dynamic school for black kids with an Afrocentric, African lens, African-centered education. At least that. It reminded me of Aretha Franklin funeral. I was sad. I said, the water dirty, all these schools closing, and here you got so-called black excellence. Now, nothing against Aretha Franklin, you know what I mean? It's not nothing to do with that. But when I see that collective black excellence, so-called, we can't do this for the kids, for the schools closing, to clean the water up. Like, it's shameful. To me, honestly, it really just, it motivates me, but it angers me too. I'm highly disappointed. You know, that I saw it. You could see it in the room. They just didn't move. They didn't make that move out.
And I think also with that Democratic Party piece was they had a follow-up in 1974 in Little Rock. And by the time they had that follow-up, a lot of those people that were there had become elected. You know what I mean? And they didn't want to break away from the Democratic Party and deal with they literally ended up rejecting a black agenda. And some would argue that, you know, by being in charge of cities and being able to put black people to work and so forth, that was good. But they, from the perspective of that, in 1974, they came back in Little Rock. And a lot of the people that were there, they had quit. They even quit in 1974 and said, we're not going to have a black agenda. I think now you have black agendas. So many different people with their individual agendas. And that's an issue. And I think that before we have unity, we have to have truth. And I think that truth leads to unity. And I think that you can get people together, but when they get together, they're not going to meet on the truth. They're going to start, they won't be honest with where they get the pork chop from. You see what I mean? What their individual interests are. And I think that one of the first things you got to do when you get in the room is you got to outline what your interests are.
Right.
And be honest about what you will sell out or how far you will go.
What are you really here for?
What are you really here for?
Like
if you can start with that, then we can go from there.
Like Jesse Jackson was saying, we got the right to move and purchase. To hell with that right. So Keep that. I don't want to live next to you. Like Nina Simone said, you don't have to live next to me, just give me my liberty. You know what I'm saying? Even today, like it's worse today, obviously, but the narrative for acceptance and integration took up way too much space. It was in the way. We don't need your acceptance. We don't want to integrate. I don't want to integrate with a beast, with an oppressor, with somebody that's historically just did everything they can to oppress and hold me down. Like I said, it came into the room with the right mindset as far as creating something independent. But another brother touched on something early on. He said, if this democratic process fails us again, no, man. Forget their process. Let's move.
And like the comedian guy said, Big Gregory. He said we use way less money than the convention people do. It did. And look, we're fine. We're having fun and everything. I mean, I didn't see that was just a time to prosper. Like they could have made a collection and bam, and set up their own neighborhood. It's so, and that should have been the gist of that meeting versus trying to fit in with their process.
Yeah.
And then Jesse mentioned egos. Well, egos were in the way. We can feel that there was plenty of egos in that room.
And then see what happened with him as we progress.
Yeah.
And that's what's so amazing, that you can actually see where people are and then see what happens with them as they go on. And from our study point, we have to look and see, well, what happens over a period of so many years when an individual can say that? Or do they really mean it, or are they saying it because that's the convenient thing to say based upon where you are at that time? You see what I mean? Like, you'll say that there, and then you'll go in another group, and then you'll spew whatever is important to them in front of them. You see, and that's why I think that truth is very important. And I think that kind of blocks us from being unified, is our inability to really deal with that truth. Then we're gonna get closer to winning, because at least we know where we are. You know what I mean? If I know, I'm just gonna throw some names. If I know, well, I'm not gonna fight Dan Gilbert, I will. I'm just saying, somebody says, I'm not gonna fight Dan Gilbert, but I will fight against James Craig. Well, at least you know up front that when there's time to go for Gilbert, we're not gonna let that cat know, but at least they told us. But what's happening is, I think a lot of people get room to say, well, you know, I'm down with, you know, fighting for everything. And that's not really where they are in their heart. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being able to acknowledge what you won't do, or where your pork chop comes from, or anything. That's a reality. And some of us don't eat the pork. You know what I mean? Like the people in this room. You know, and we made a conscious decision that we're going to deal. And people say the pain. I don't really feel the pain, because psychologically I'm free. So I don't feel, they say, oh, it's going to be a lot of pain when you go against the grain. Well, if you acknowledge them as the grain, then you've already, and that's really some of where you're going. And you acknowledge them as the benchmark of effectiveness, then you've already lost the battle, because you've lost in your mind. So that's going to impact how you try to reach out to people, or how you try to grow your movement, or even live your individual life. You see what I mean?
I feel like movements all the time. And what I always urge the people I'm around, I say, spend as much energy creating your own. As much or more energy, instead of trying to touch their process and change their process and they set up. We got women in Lansing, you know, marching about the schools. We got people in Lansing and in Flint protesting about the water. It's a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of time. We need to put that towards building our own. Period, point blank. This is a maze without an exit. Is what we in until we move away from them. Ain't no way around it. People say, well, it's important to engage in the political processes. Capital is power. Look, man. Especially when they took the cap off of the amount that can be donated to political.
That changed.
That changed. It's really done.
Yeah,
it's all, throw it out the window. It's like a dog that want to attack people. Put it down. Just put it down. It's done.
Because it consciousness or understanding of who they are, then you're going to be spinning like a hamster forever, and you'll forever be caught up in that diversion.
Chris, could you let these folks in? You know, if they got something they want to add. No?
Do y'all know anything you all like to say about it? I mean, if what would an agenda look like today? You know.
And I have a question. If you don't want to deal with that. I'm sorry. Well, I'm curious if anybody wants to know why Coleman Young led that delegation out of that convention.
The beautiful thing is when you see this convention, one of the things that the movie really talked about was events that led up to it. You know, Malcolm being assassinated and King being assassinated and even folks like Robert Kennedy and those folks being assassinated and Nixon being there, and then you got COINTELPRO, and then you got the Panther Party, and then you got the protests against the Vietnam War, and you had this mess in 1968, and then you have some blacks getting elected at the turn of that decade. Of course, we can't ignore any of the rebellions that have taken place in any of the cities, and all of this leads to, there were Black Power conferences, and even one here that Blvd Peak had at Wayne State. So there was a Black Power convention in Newark in 1967. So there were different Black Power conventions, and all these different groups that had these different beliefs and philosophies and so forth, all coming together for a black political convention. And even in that, they talked about how they would bring others to the table if they had agreed with the agenda. So Michigan walks out because you had some folks there like Marcellus Ivory and Nelson Jack Edwards. These were people that were black that were in the union movement. And then you had Coleman, who had just become a national delegate for the DNC in 1968. And you had that group, and then you also had some people that was in Michigan that had been a part of an independent party before, and that was in the 40s. And when their candidate lost, they had went 15, 20 years without work. You see what I mean? So they were looking at where Barack was at his time in life, and where they had been in their time of life, and they had been where he was going, and they were looking at it from that. So sometimes people's different experiences lead them to do, take different positions, and that's something that you have to look at.
What you just touched on though is more the reason they couldn't find work.
For a long time.
Because we wasn't doing our own thing.
A long time.
That's
you know what I mean?
That's why though.
And
if we would have began our own infrastructure, in a lot of cases you can create work for yourself. If you attach your movement that way, if you work your movement in the right way, you can create work yourself. So, I mean, it's obviously not an easy process,
Oh
you know, but
no. Harder now than it was even then.
right,
You know.
because like you said, it's no real black political conscience, no black
Right.
conscience now. It's
They
a
say
lot
no
of
solution,
smoke and
solution.
mirrors. And so, you know, it like I just said, that just echoes more to my point of why we needed to break away. Why that day, that room was a great opportunity to start what could be now, what we could be living in now as black people, a much better state of existence. Had they went forward and made that happen, we wouldn't even care about American politics, about mainstream politics. We have our own. We have our own things to deal with. You know, anything you really doing about changing the lives of black people in the black community, you got to start with the youth. You got to start with educating the youth. You got to pull them out, get I call it the three-headed monster. George Washington, Christopher Columbus, and white Jesus. They poison the hearts and minds of black people by the time we
Thomas Jefferson in there too.
By the time we 7, 8 years old, our place in humanity, at the top of humanity, we not there in this setting, in the mainstream, in their curriculum, in their society. We not present at the top of humanity. Our place in the human family has pretty much been erased. So it's an uphill battle. So anything you do has got to start with the youth.
The youth
You got to start with the youth and the truth.
The youth and the truth.
Youth to the truth.
Yeah.
You know, pull them out of these schools, man. These schools is poison. It's poison to the psyche. It's poison. Get them in learning environments where there's no screens, you know, where there's no ink pens, where it's just materials and things and creativity. You know what I'm saying? Get them from behind them desks for 8 hours. That's just factory training. I was at work, the bell rung at Android next to me.
Everybody start moving.
And I hear the bell ring and they start moving. I said, damn, that was just like school. I'm like, man, that's exactly the same thing as what school did.
Yes.
And I'm like, it's a bad fix, man. And we
Right, because the school is supposed to be really in your home. And the teachers would get very upset when you bring that up. When we would raise our kids, we would say that the school's job was to supplement what we are as first teacher.
It is.
And boy, you talking about people getting mad.
That's the way they set the society up.
And I would say, no, we're the first teacher, you know. We're not warehousing our child. Yet, you're supplementing what we got, and we're going to evaluate what you're doing and keep control over the mind of the child. You see what I mean? Because they're supplementing what we have brought in, which means we will control that curriculum. And when you bring that up, you had a whole lot of movement around curriculum control around that time, when they were taking over schools, the black students movement in universities, and you had Cornell and all these different universities, and then you had the Council of Independent Black Institutions that came out of that movement, which was all the different schools that we once used to have in Detroit. I don't know if you remember, we had a slew of them. Aisha Shule and Nataki Taliba and Timbuktu and Malcolm and Marcus. We had all these schools, and then when the charters came, some of those schools spun off to be charters. But we had a very strong, the last great times I remember in Detroit when we had that strong African-centered curriculum within the schools. And it was linked to a study group movement that took place in the city. And at the end of the day, when they took over the schools 20 years ago, that slowly broke down to where we are today, where your school board voted to create a school that deals with Latin and Greece as being the root of humanity. And they're gonna have that right there on Joy Road and Wildermere. So they're building a $70 million campus that's going to teach black kids that the root of civilization was Rome and Greece. And that was voted in by a school board that's all black. So again, like we say, that mind,
They all bought.
that mind,
All black, all bought.
that
For them to
mind.
vote for that, they paid.
Well, it's even deeper than that. They would do it anyway. You hear what I'm telling you? I'm saying that it's one thing, we can fight you with the money, we can deal with that.
And
That's like Gary Brown shutting off the water, the way they shut the water off. That, if you took his paycheck away, he would show up and shut the water off for free. And when we're at that point, man, that we're in bad shape, and that's what we're struggling against.
and see,
and that,
who look the best, who speak the nice jive. And that's who get in. Not who's actually sacrificing.
and then it gets to the point where the name becomes over and over.
Right. But it should be the action. It should be the sacrifice of the person earning them anything. I don't vote. I don't participate at all. I participate in my community. I do workshops, teach families and kids how to grow food. I keep the streets clean. That's how I get down. They can have what they do. I'm gonna show them we can do this. See the trees, I done planted 20 trees in the hood right here. Right over here. Finkel, Dexter, Glenwood, right here, Oakman, right here. Them kids gonna see that they did that. They gonna see that food growing. They gonna know they did that. You know what I'm saying? I pray that it's more powerful than I hope it's gonna be. You see what I'm saying? But
Yeah, go ahead.
So, from my point of view, as part of this time and looking at it at that time, I think it was about March 1972.
Yeah.
Okay, so seeing at that time and then seeing Dick Gregory having his point of views and putting his word out is very inspiring, because I always see him as this older gentleman and seeing him as this younger, you know, strong, and Dick Gregory and putting his word out. I seen how his style, you know, attracted to the crowd and how he made everybody smile and not so serious. It's like, yeah, we gonna get them all. No, he said, no, we gonna get this regardless. So we ain't got to do all that mad talking. We ain't got to do all that rough housing. We all about to sit here calmly and wait on the time where we gonna take back the rules are. So that was my kind of gravitation on it, and seeing Mr. Jackson as well and doing his performance. But mostly what stand out to me was seeing Dick Gregory, and that was very inspiring. So that was my point of view from it.
Yeah, that's the thing. You got to see a lot
Thank
of
you.
people. I know a lot of those folk people. And, you know, he was consistent all the way from the beginning to the end.
Young blood.
You know, it's really something to watch those events. And you learn from them and where to go from here. And you see where you're at. And you can kind of see, you know, what took place over a period of time and why we're sitting here in the, you know, in the condition we're in.
Looking at that, it's such a possibility. It's not even a possibility. It's very, very accurate. You should always get up and just say, all right, set the plan up, put our money into it. Don't nobody go nowhere. We all got to power. What we all gonna do with it. All right, you gonna buy this business, you gonna buy this business, you gonna buy this business. You get your connect just like we have our own connects on landscaping and all. Just like we have that type of connection, we all have to put ourselves into this big power, they say, gold platter, and just make sure that we put all our food in so that we can all feed our own village. That's the only way we can do it, is we all just put our 2 cents in. And then seeing that, like how everything was all situated or organized, and it was a foundation and where everybody can meet, just like how everybody can meet, everybody can do the same thing anywhere else, especially here.
And that's why I think that dealing with consciousness is
Very important.
is very important.
Female side.
Bring it on down.
All right, I just wanted to say that I totally agree with you about, you know, the majority of stuff that you said, especially about, you know, starting our own businesses and having our own instead of relying on these corporations out here, because we have to really, in order to practice group economics, definitely. community. I just, wanted to say that, a lot of the things that you said were interesting. I agree with them. I understand.
I appreciate
really
it.
get it.
It's good.
Yes.
That's
That's
beautiful.
what I wanted to
So that's what we gotta do. We gotta cut them off. One of my teachers told me, he said, I'm gonna imitate his voice because he's such a funny guy. He said, Brother Pasha, so what the problem is, man, we can't get rid of the white man because we can't get him out of our minds. Everywhere we turn, everywhere we look, he's there. We think that even to struggle, we gotta save up enough of his money to start the revolution. That's the problem right there. He said you gotta be able to drop. He said you gotta have the fortitude to just drop and go and rebuild. It was a jewel. It was a jewel he dropped on me. I tell as many people, I share that with as many people as I can. And it's true. If you can't shake him, you're not going to be able to shake him. You close your eyes and you picture God 20 times. How many white images is going to be out of them 20? It's going to be some. For almost everybody. It's sad. So this is the first place the revolution takes place.
And it's always going to be constant fight. And that's why, you see people start off a certain way and they eventually lose their mind. There are a lot of cats 25, 30 years ago that I was working with, they've actually lost their mind. Because it's up here.
Yeah.
It's up here.
It's hard to deal with. It's hard to grasp. It's like I would liken it to an individual who has an itch that they can't reach, and it never stop, and they can't never reach it. You might kill yourself. And being trapped in this, when you become aware of what's going on, what's being done to you, see, they got it easy because a lot of people, that cognitive dissonance is real.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, it's easy to reject that there's something being done to you. Therefore, you just move on in society, in the flow of things, of how they design it. But those of us who say, no, I know it's something being done to me and I'm going to recognize it and I'm going to try to address it, that's when it becomes dangerous.
Yeah, and that's when it becomes hard for you as an individual because you maintain that peace and then that war is real. You see what I mean? You start to see folks next to you just pass on. I think that we romanticize, you see Malcolm being shot, or you see Martin being shot, or you see Angela Davis going through what she went through, and you get caught up in that. The hard part is when you see the cats that you work with daily actually falling over a period of years, and it happens. And one of the things that you get out of that was when you do the follow-up, you see that the Israel-Palestine question separated a lot of them. You had a caucus that didn't support Shirley Chisholm. You had, so these things happen, and that's the challenge of being in the liberation struggle. It's ongoing, and it's here, it's out here, it's ongoing.
Africa everywhere, books everywhere. So I didn't have to. I see a lot of my counterparts coming into consciousness, and they learning that everything they've been taught their whole life is a lie, a sham. Like that again, cognitive dissonance kicks in. So some people, they reject obvious. This is a table right here. This edge is here. No, it's not. It's a circle. That is not a table. It's a balloon. I refuse to accept that this is not a table. That it's not a balloon because I've been taught my whole life it's a balloon. You mean try to tell me it's a table with an edge? And that's gotta be Like, I can't imagine. Because like I said, I never went through it, but I see people struggle with coming into consciousness and enlightening and educating themselves about history, world history, theology and religion. And they crushed.
The effect of the cultural bomb is to annihilate a people's belief in their names, in their language, in their environment, in their heritage of struggle, in their unity, in their capacities, and ultimately in their capabilities, ultimately in themselves. It makes them see their past as one wasteland of non-achievement, and it makes them want to distance themselves from that wasteland. It makes them want to identify with that which is furthest removed from themselves, for instance, with other people's languages rather than their own. It makes them identify with that which is reactionary. All those forces which would stop their own springs of life. It even plants serious doubts about the moral righteousness of struggle. Possibilities of triumph or victory are seen as remote, ridiculous dreams. Y'all feel that?
Yeah.
Now, this is a guy who was put in prison for writing in his own language, or simply writing a play in his own language.
That was the African brother, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.